Okay, we're recording.
Okay. All right, I'm going to have to interrupt your conversation here because I've got the mic. And I don't necessarily need the mic. I want to make sure my wife can hear me all the way in the back of the room. I am the surrogate for Darren Bailey today. Darren is up north. There's a few events he's attending tonight. The one that he's at right now is with the Indian population in Calumet City. So that's a big event for him. Cindy is over in Peoria as we speak. She is attending the event at the Weaver Farm, Meet the Candidates. So I'm who you get for today. And so if I were to say anything, once again, thank you. Darren obviously appreciates everything that we can do here in Illinois. Most importantly, if Darren were here, he would tell you that he is just one person and that this movement has not been about Darren Bailey. It's been about the movement to restore Illinois and obviously the freedoms that were guaranteed by our Constitution. And we currently have a governor who doesn't believe that he has to adhere to the Constitution of Illinois. In fact, that was evidenced in July 2nd of 2020 when he was found guilty of being outside of the Constitution with his unconstitutional edicts that he was placing on all of us in regards to the COVID thing, whatever it was, whatever it is, whatever it will be. So Darren's plea to everyone is get involved, do something, whether it's run for school board, run for your town council, run for an elected position, become a poll watcher, become an election judge. Just get involved, get 10 people to get involved. And I know that it doesn't always appear that we're going in the same direction, but we are. Quick story, and I'll leave it at this. In 2017, we started this journey, Darren and I did together. I was running for state representative of the 105th district. Darren was running for state rep of the 109th. We were both encouraged to get involved in politics by Kyle McCarter from Lebanon, Illinois. Kyle is the ambassador to Kenya appointed by the Trump administration back in 2019. He had term limited himself as a state senator. He had run for Congress against John Shimkus at one time, and John Shimkus went scorched earth on him, similar to what Richard Irvin tried to do to Darren Bailey, which Richard, unbeknownst to Richard, even though he had $50 million and the support of the GOP, Darren had a couple other things going for him. One, he's a faithful man, and he believed that God had called him to this moment. And number two, Darren got out ahead of this thing. And that's part of where we started in 2017. Darren was successful in his run as state rep. I was not able to beat the establishment candidate, that was Dan Brady. Dan is currently running for Secretary of State, but I ran against Dan twice. The easiest thing I could do with Dan was to point to what we do know. Dan was out on the streets. He voted to raise double the gas tax as a Republican. He also was claiming that we had a balanced budget. And I would point out to Dan that Frank Montino, who is our Auditor General in Springfield, has a report that he puts out every year. And the most recent report of 2021 shows that there wasn't enough adequate reporting by the agencies of the state of Illinois for him to compile a report to tell us whether the budget was balanced. So even though Pritzker professes that the budget is balanced, there is no budget balance in Illinois, and there won't be because there's no way they can make it happen. Not even with federal money from COVID can they truly get us out of the predicament we're in. But Darren and I were convinced that we needed to continue to go. He ended up running for state senate when his senator stepped down. In 2020, I ran again against Dan Brady. Did a little better. I went from 25% of the electorate to 38%, so I gained 13 percentage points, which meant that Dan couldn't survive the third round of similar to Frazier versus Ali, right? The third one wasn't going to work so well for him. Fortunately, I guess, or how God works, they redistricted the map, and Dan and I were no longer in the same representative district. And he decided, Dan Hawkins ended up taking over that representative district that Dan Brady would have been in, and Dan decided to run for Secretary of State, and then found out real quick that even though he had contributed well over $300,000 to the Illinois GOP party, he was not their favorite choice or pick. They ended up slating a gentleman named John Millhiser to run with Richard Irvin and the slate that Irvin put together. So when Darren and I obviously knew that this was a big task in front of us, obviously it was just not Darren and I, it was Blaine Wilhauer, Brad Hallbrook, Dan Calkins, Chris Miller, and let's see who else was part of the Magnificent Seven. Our friend from up in Winnebago County, John is going to come to me. Hold on. He just ran again. He got beat in 2020, but he then came back and he's on the ballot for 2021. John Cabello. So John Cabello is a deputy sheriff up there in Winnebago County. He was part of the movement to restore Illinois. We started going around from county to county, promoting the restoration of Illinois, the opening of Illinois. We were on the steps of the Capitol in 2020 when they started shutting down. Darren was also in the courtroom. I was with Darren the day that Judge Michael McCaney handed down his ruling against the governor in 2020. We knew that we had something. At least now we had a foothold. People were standing up. People were saying they didn't want this, and we already had Tom DeVore as an advocate. And then came the fall of 2020, and, well, let me back up a little bit to Memorial Day of 2020. Memorial Day of 2020, we were in Chicago, and Mayor Lightfoot had locked down the entire city. In fact, you couldn't even go up and down Lakeshore Drive. We had a rally up there on Memorial Day, and it attracted about 800 people. They surrounded us with Chicago police, but the Chicago police they were not going to do anything. Mayor Lightfoot wanted them to disperse us and make us leave. They wouldn't allow us to erect a stage, so we used some planters that were there and put a piece of plywood over top of it, and the speaker spoke there. That's where Darren spoke that day. Vernon Jones was there, Rick Green from Texas, Michael Gerber, the gentleman who wrote the E-Myth. But that day was unique because there were people with handmade signs that said, Darren Bailey for governor. Now, Darren was just sworn in to be state senator. So he did one term as a representative. He just started his first term as a state senator, so he hadn't even hardly completed 2 years. And people were screaming, Darren Bailey for governor. Well, when we got to the fall of 2020, after the lawsuit, after the victory in court, and it was moved on or appealed, Darren and Cindy said that they were going to fast and pray, which they did, about a possible run for governor. About Halloween is when that decision was made. They felt that God had led them to run for governor, and he announced in February of 2021. We knew it was an uphill climb. Once again, the reason that we did what we did is they've never seen anything like it. We put more signs into the marketplace, into voters' hands in 2021 than we will in 2022. We did that intentionally because we wanted to get ahead of it. We knew that eventually we would be taking on the guy that is a trust fund millionaire and could spend $200 million to win the governor's race again. So we had to go and do that ugly four-letter word that most leftists don't like. W-O-R-K. Work. So we went to work, covered 102 counties in 2021, and that's the plan. We just kept duplicating that. You know, once again, a successful thing, we duplicated it over and over again. Meet and greets, meet the people, talk to the people about restoring Illinois. The message hasn't changed. We still know that a zero-based budget is what we need, which means every agency has to come up with a budget that justifies every dollar they spend. People, the unions say, well, how are we going to, you know, how are we going to survive in something like that? Well, we're all going to have to do our little part, you know. Mostly the state-funded unit, the state pension unions. And it's gonna take a lot. I mean, there's no easy route. Darren never is one to mince words with saying that there's an easy way out, because there's not an easy way out. We've accumulated well over $300 billion in unfunded liabilities. To put that in perspective, we have a budget of $46 billion a year. That's what, 8 or 9 years of our budget, but the interest on that debt that we have on our pension debt is about $10 billion a year. So that's almost 20% of our annual budget. So this is why it's so critical. If we were to have all the interest that we pay on our debt, and we were to have all of the unfunded mandates, if the money that we spend on unfunded mandates, and we were to have all of the money that is wasted in Springfield, we could fund every road, every bridge, every mental health program. We could even continue to put more money into schools, but I don't think that's the solution for the schools. The schools are a whole different beast, right? That has evolved into something that I think that we're going to have a conversation about. And on day one of the Bailey administration, it's going to be a real simple conversation, because he's going to put in place into the Illinois State Board of Education people that he can trust, that won't be pushing this craziness down the throats of the unions. The teachers' unions obviously facilitate a lot with the Illinois State Board of Education to get CRT, to get the SB 818, the over-sexualization of our children, or what Darren calls the perversion of our children. So those are the things he's going to do in the first day. There's a lot of work, and that's why I think Darren continually appeals to people to be part of the movement. We have, you know, we have the grassroots movement. There's, like I started saying, there's no candidate in the history of Illinois that's ever put out as many signs in a off year, 2021. There's no one who's covered the territory, put together an organization of 102 county coordinators, 11 regional coordinators, has built out the infrastructure of what the Illinois Republican Party should be. That's what the GOP should be, is what Darren has created. So we have our organization, we've said it from day one, we're not waiting for anyone. We're not slowing down the bus. There's a lot of talk, which we'll continue to see in the next 60 days, about where does Darren stand, especially since most of the votes in Illinois tend to be above I-80 because of the population base. The ones that we're fighting for. The majority of the votes are still outside of the Chicagoland area. I mean, there's more people that live outside of Chicago. I mean, you can look at someone saw a trade saying that 60% of the population lives in Chicago and suburban counties. I said, no, you might want to go back to your mapping and look, because even though they're just smaller towns, that adds up when you take into account 102 counties, right? Cook County is only one county. So, but there's still a good percentage of the Democrat voter base above I-80, which is part of what we have to win over. Right now, if you're privy to the information, there's about 2.2, 2.3 million, depending on the numbers, of Democrats. There's about 1.8 million Republicans. But there's also 1.6 million people who are not declared, undecideds. And that's why Darren's spending so much time above I-80. We're going to continue to lean into this thing. We're going to continue to ask everybody to participate. We do have a plan. The 55% approval rating that's being reported for J.B. Pritzker, I mean, if you believe that, you also believe what they said about Hillary Clinton. They are reporting that JB is polling at 56% of the electorate, and Darren's at 38%, so it gives him a 16% margin. That's not true either. I mean, it's just, those are just fantasy land, but that's what we're up against. That's what we're going to expect. We believe that we're still in the place that we were coming out of the primary. It's a neck-and-neck race. The margin of error is about 3 to 4%. Pritzker might have a slight advantage, but what Pritzker doesn't have is a positive approval rating. He has a -17, similar to what Richard Irvin had, -17 approval rating, disapproval rating. So it means that the undecideds, they're not going to go for J.B. Pritzker. So we believe, Darren believes, that that margin, we're going to have at least a 10-point victory over J.B. Pritzker. That's what we're going to push forward, and that's where we're at. So I appreciate you guys coming out once again, and thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak a little bit. Is there any questions?
So where are the pockets of Dems other than and Rock Island County?
Yeah, and Metro East. Yeah, Champagne's become a little hot spot. I was just there the other day.
Are the colleges there? Because we have so many kids in college, they register there, plus they're registered at their home.
Yeah. Well, I just was on a phone call with Don Tracy in the Illinois GOP, and they've got 2 young people who voted twice. 2.
That's all?
Well, that's 2 that they were able to verify that they did. Oh yeah, but they've got. They can't even get the state's attorneys to prosecute them.
We're running the same thing. We
Yeah.
can get our own county.
Yeah. So once again, I think the key is when we look at this, and I know it's a concern about the universities, if we do our job, which I believe we're doing, and I believe that I'm seeing it, and Darren keeps saying it, if you could only see what I see, if you could only see what the reporters have never seen, the amount of work has paid off. Yeah, the polls are going to be flooded. I think we're going to get more people to the polls in 2022 than we've seen in a long time in Illinois. The reason, for instance, why Carrie Lake won in Arizona against the establishment Republicans who tried to obviously book that election. You know, it took, what, about a week to declare Carrie Lake the winner. It was Maricopa County, but they had flooded the polls with patriots, and she ended up, it was a resounding win for her, you know, trying to overcome the GOP establishment. Well, the same thing here. We're going to overwhelm the polls, and I think we're going to see so many people, and we're going to, you know, obviously have this plan of poll watchers, election judges, the ones that have signed up lately, but especially the poll watchers implementing the Virginia model. There's more to that. Out back on the table, there's a flyer, and most of you know about the movement to obviously get about 6,000 to 7,000 people to the polls as poll watchers. We're going to flood the zone, and that's what we're going to do. And it's going to be so overwhelming that they're going to require time during that 14 days after the election day to backfill the votes they need. Because that's when it would happen, right? It's always after the fact, because they'll never announce the winner on election day. So, but we believe that if we have enough of a margin on November 9th, that it will be very hard for them to overcome that. I believe that that's where, you know, that's where Darren's at, that's where our campaign's at. Something you might not have heard, and this is the craziness. So, I'm not going to ask a show of hands of where you stood during the primary, if you're a Bailey or Irvin or Sullivan. So we have polling, which we do as a campaign, top secret polling, right? That we swear that we won't go out in confidentiality and expose. But we had 52% of the electorate in 2021. That's before Irvin got in, Sullivan was in. We had 52% after Irvin got in, and we ended up at 58%. So when they talk about, well, it was JB's $30 million that moved the needle, well, okay, he moved us from 52 to 57%, if that's what you want to think. But he didn't change our numbers. And the last thing we could do is go out on the streets, right? Because we didn't want to create any false hope that people, you know, thought that they shouldn't go to the polls. But you guys obviously have this in the back. So we had the election in the back. We weren't